Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Marco Dre Show, everyone. It's Wednesday, December 17th, 2025. Thank you for tuning in today's show to hear all the relevant groundbreaking news here in America and around the world, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you might get your podcast. It's available now on all streaming apps for your listening pleasures. And be sure to share with as many people as possible so we can make America smart yet again. Hope everyone's ready for the best hour radio has to offer. Uncensored and ready to go. It's, I got to start off with this topic. I didn't want to, but I saw this late last night. I'm disgusted by this. On Monday's broadcast, I spoke with you about the erasure of the native white culture here in America. Again, thanks to low birth rates, people not getting married, or simply not just having enough children to keep the existing demographic here in America, and of course, the issue of immigration, among other reasons. Now, one of the jokes I made to you was, of course, that what are they going to do? Take down the Lincoln Memorial and replace it with a statue of Barack Obama? And, I said it in jest, of course. But I looked last night. I couldn't believe it. NBC News has an article titled, U.S. Capitol Unveils Statue of Teen Civil Rights Activist Icon Barbara Rose Johns, taking Robert E. Lee's spot. Like clockwork. I see this and I say to myself, you got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me with this nonsense. The dunces from Virginia decided to take down General Robert E. Lee's statue and put it in the crypt of the Capitol building, under the rotunda, out of view of everyone that comes in, of course. But there I see the video, and there's many people clapping, and among those people, I see Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin and House Speaker Mike Johnson. They're clapping. I couldn't believe it. And who is Barbara Rose Johns? Like everyone else listening to the program right now, for the first time, you're hearing her name. Why the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue, by the way? Why pick out Robert E. Lee? Well, of course, they love to show you that they don't know history. They're equating Robert E. Lee with slavery, as many would imagine, right? Oh, Robert E. Lee fought for the Confederates. He fought for slavery. Evil institution. How dare we put a statue of Robert E. Lee up? Again, I'm looking at this. I'm seeing Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic-elect governor, Abigail Spanbergers, right? All these people clapping at Emancipation Hall. Yep, there it is. Look at this. Johnson goes on to say this. He says, "We are here to honor one of the true trailblazers, a woman who embodied the essence of the American spirit in her fight for liberty and justice and equal treatment under the law." Yeah. Barbara Rose Johns. I can't believe this. Now, she was involved in the case of Brown versus Board of Education from 1954. And at the age of 16, it says here that in 1951, she led a strike for equal education at the Moton High School in Farmville, Virginia. The students' cause gained a support for the NAACP lawyers who filed a lawsuit that would become one of the 5 cases that the U.S. Supreme Court reviewed upon taking up Brown versus Board of Education. What they found, too, was the separate but equal cause was not constitutional. Very big case, very big landmark case. Chief Justice Earl Warren resided over that case, and they got it right. But we're taking one individual of 5 cases. Now, it's not like they're taking Oliver Brown and putting his statue there. He was the one that fought against this, of course. I don't understand this, other than they're trying to, again, take away history. Why not put more statues up? Again, if you want to commemorate what somebody did that was right and just. I'm not saying her actions weren't right or just. But to compare it to what Robert E. Lee did, I mean, it is just incomparable in my estimation. Absolutely incomparable. Now, for those of you that don't know, or believe, rather, that the Civil War was fought for slavery, you would be wrong. And again, like you, I was taught this growing up from a very young age. I think I learned about it first in, the 5th grade. The Civil War was fought over slavery. Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln's War against slavery. And we learned about, white versus black, of course, at a very young age. You'd be wrong to think all that, of course, because it's simply not true. The Civil War was not fought over slavery. The Civil War was fought over economics. It was fought over the moral tariff upon which Lincoln wanted to impose on the southern ports. So, hearing this for the first time, I'd be shaking your head going, no way, couldn't be true. Oh, it is true. It is true. In fact, the Republicans at the time, who were first taking office, actually wanted to go out and say that they had nothing to do with preventing the southern states from having slaves. In fact, they wanted to pass an amendment called the Corwin Amendment to allow them to have the institution of slavery in the states that already had it. That's how dedicated the Republicans were to keeping the southern states inside the Union. So, how can we say that the war itself was fought over slavery when we have representatives in the Republican Party, by the way, coming out and saying, you know what, we'll let you keep this, we'll let you have this one, but we're not going to let you get away on this tariff that we're trying to push. And if you look at the economics of the time, you'll see that the North would have suffered greatly with the South leaving. Absolutely. Again, their ports were very low or had no tariffs on their ports, so it made more sense for Europe and other nations to bring their goods in through the South. Think about how much they would be losing. But now the question comes into play, what about Robert E. Lee? Right? He's the person at hand here. He's the person they are smearing. They are attacking his name. I want to read this to you. I'm actually reading a book right now, and it's called When in the Course of Human Events, Arguing the Case for Southern Secession. It was written by Charles Adams, and he has a section here in the book about Robert E. Lee. And I'm going to read this to you. And by the way, if you ever want to read real history, go look at what other people in other parts of the world said about the Civil War in America. You could look at Charles Dickens and what he wrote, and you can compare it to other British people like John Stuart Mill. But here he goes. It says here, as for Mill's assertion that the South was fighting for slavery, here he gets the facts of who started the war and why, all mixed up. The Supreme Commander of the Confederate Forces, Robert E. Lee, hated slavery and said so. He was offered command of the Union armies, but turned it down because these armies were to be used to invade his homeland of Virginia, which, of course, as we know, is a southern state, and other states. And he accepted command of a much smaller force, the armies of Northern Virginia, to defend his native land from an invasion. That, Mr. Mill, is why the Southern armies were fighting for, to expel a foreign invader. Now, in the issue of tax, or the tariff issue, what the Southerners called paying tribute to the North, Mill is correct by pointing out that when the South seceded, a moderate tariff in place, the ultra-high moral tariff was not put in place until March of 1861. So the main seceding states had left the Union and formed the Confederate States of America prior to this taking place. But here, Mill had got it wrong, because he hadn't done his research, by the way. You couldn't say that they they had done this as a response to slavery, because slavery was not on the table then. And I just told you, again, because I do my research, they were going to allow them to keep slaves. So if slavery was the main issue here, is what they're trying to assert, if slavery was the main issue, and they were going to allow it, why would the states have seceded? It's because it was all economic, folks. Again, you're never going to be told this on the news or any other program. That's why you listen to my show. But again, it smears Robert E. Lee. We're taking down a statue of a man who was defending his people from an unjust invasion. Now you can argue, well, Lincoln wanted to keep the southern states inside the Union. It was to keep the nation together. There's no moral justification for the going to war, though, for that. Again, you could look at all the laws of war at the time. There's nothing that justifies going in and killing people to bring them back into the nation. The other way around, actually. Again, look more into what the moral tariff is, and you could understand what that means. But there's no justification for the war. And again, there's no justification to take down Robert E. Lee's statue, in my estimation, of course. But this is how they try to view history. You review Lee as a slave owner, which he never was, by the way, or someone who promoted slavery, which he never did. He disdained slavery. But what he was a Virginian. And for Glenn Youngkin, again, the governor of Virginia, to take the side of Ralph Northam, whose idea was to take down the statue and clap, just shows you they don't understand real history. So again, I implore everyone, you could look at the information I've given you. You can check all of it. Check and see if I'm right. I think I am. I've done research on it. You can look at what the moral tariff is and what effect it had, again, on the southern states. This is what they were talking about. You go down and ask again, you had people that would come from Europe, and they would ask the southern soldiers, what were you fighting over? Now, a couple of them would say, of course, to get these damn Yankees out of here. That was number one. But they would talk about the tariffs. They would talk about the economy and how it really put the southern states down, how they were losing wealth, how it was unjust. It was an unequal representation of what should be tariffs for everybody. And again, the North had more to benefit from it. And again, we can look at who invaded who first, all things of that nature. It wasn't the South that attacked the North. It was the North that attacked the South. So we've got to come to understand what was happening here, of course. Again, very, very sad to see these things. It says here that the statue replaces one of Lee that was removed in December of 2020 from the Capitol, where it had represented Virginia for 111 years. Well, not anymore. The removal occurred during the time of the renewed national attention over Confederate monuments after the death of George Floyd, and was relocated to the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. Oh, out of the purview of every single person. So they try to smear history. They try to rewrite history. And look at this. It says here that the Commonwealth of Virginia will now be properly represented by an actual patriot who embodied the principle of liberty and justice for all, not a traitor who took up arms against the United States to preserve the brutal institution of chattel slavery, is what Hakeem the Hack Jeffries said. What a lying piece of human garbage. This isn't a black versus white issue. The Civil War wasn't even that. But Hakeem Jeffries makes it that. Do you see what he does? It sows division. I can't even believe I'm reading this right now. What a complete bunch of nonsense. Taking down a statue of a man who actually fought for Virginians. I'm not saying Miss Johns' cause wasn't great. It was. But the idea that you're going to just simply smear Robert E. Lee as a traitor? Really? What have you ever done, Hakeem, for your people of New York? Anything? Would you go to war for them? Would you protect them? Of course you wouldn't, you hack you. You schmuck, you dunce, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I can't even believe this right now. I can't believe we are taking down statues. Again, of Southerners, under the guise that they were fighting for slavery, which they were not. In fact, by the way, most people that fought in the Civil War for the South, the vast majority of them were not slave owners, ladies and gentlemen, just so we're all clear on this. Most of them were very, very poor farmers. But they were fighting to protect their people. Go look at Sherman's March to the Sea. What happened in Georgia there, if you want to talk about injustices happening during the Civil War. No one is defending slavery here. And no one during the war was defending slavery. Slavery was on its way out, actually, if you really read history and understand trends of what's going on. But this is sad. This is very sad. And then we go look at, here's what Glenn Youngkin said. Again, it's very upsetting to see this. It's an incredibly profound moment, a moment to stand in a tar shack classroom with a hot potbelly stove as a heater, tar paper walls, shabby desks, right where 16-year-old Barbara Rose Johns courageously organized her schoolmates and stood up to the lie that's separate but equal. I mean, again, no one's arguing that. I don't know anyone that's arguing that. Glenn, do you know anyone that's arguing that? Separate but equal? Yeah, I think we righted that wrong in 1954. Did we not? I think so. But again, so many years later, they try to take actual history and we forget about it. That's the problem. You forget about real events that took place. That's the issue here. Nobody's arguing that what Johns did was courageous or merit-based or even correct. Of course it was. But to take down Robert E. Lee, who, again, by the way, went to West Point, obviously was the first pick by Lincoln. And obviously, if events had been different, if they had more, obviously, organization and more money involved, and what, you see the South win, what are you going to say about that then? The idea they try to whitewash history, change history, rewrite history, again, is just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. You could have a statue for Miss Johns if that's important to you. But we know what they're doing here, folks. We know what they're trying to do. And again, when you see Hakeem Jeffries getting up and making a stupid remark like that, what a dumb idiot. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And this guy is leading the Democrats. Yep, there you go. So again, the erasure of history, folks. And what happens when you erase history or don't know history? You're condemned to repeat things. This is what they're banking on. This is what they want to do. Very, very sad to see this happening. And again, putting him under the rotunda where no one's going to see it. What an absolute disgrace. If you were from Virginia, I would be up in arms about this. This is disgusting. This is disgraceful. And this is the lies of history of which we're told here. Oh, by the way, President Trump is going to be speaking tonight to address the nation. So that he'll be giving an address from the White House. And it says, well, on Truth Social, I'll be giving an address to the nation tomorrow night. This is what he had said as of yesterday. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, he said that. Oh, I'm sorry. He posted this yesterday. Excuse me. Says, I will be giving an address to the nation, obviously tonight, live from the White House. I look forward to seeing you then. It has been a great year for our country and the best yet to come. Okay, nobody knows what the hell he's going to be talking about. I'm guessing he's going to be discussing, obviously, some of the current events we've been experiencing, the attacks we've been seeing around the world. Who knows? It could be about what's happening in Venezuela. I don't know. Maybe there's some good economic information he wants to give. I don't know. But I would recommend everyone stay tuned to hear what he's got to say. All right. What else passed recently? Well, the Senate nearing the final passage today for the annual military policy in the National Defense Authorization Act that I told you is going to be the sum of $901 billion, as if to say a lot of money. Some good benefits to it, of course. Going to be raising pay for troops by 3.8%, obviously gaining bipartisan support in the U.S. Senate. And, the 3,000-page bill, obviously, no one's read all of it. What else is new? But there is a point of contention between Congress, of course, and the Pentagon, as the Trump administration reorients its focus away from security in Europe and, of course, towards Central and South America. Why is that? Well, look at the blockade happening now in the Caribbean around Venezuela. It's as clear as mud. We need money to go to war with Venezuela and, of course, support all that. There's also pressure for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to provide lawmakers with a video of the strikes that took place on September 2nd of the alleged drug boats. I love how they always put that in there. Alleged. And then they got up and talk about how these people are narco-terrorists, as if that means anything. Yeah, Hegseth is trying to stonewall Congress from, of course, and you and I from seeing exactly what took place on September 2nd when people that were shipwrecked were murdered by SEAL Team 6. Yep. Look at this. But the overall bill represents a compromise between parties. It implements many of Trump's executive orders and proposals on eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in the military and grants emergency military powers at the U.S. border with Mexico. It also enhances congressional oversight of the Defense Department and repeals several years old authorizations. Well, you know, I'm more interested in these boat strikes right now. I really want to see what's in these videos. Don't you? Don't you want to see if Pete Hegseth is telling the truth or not? I don't think he's telling the truth. I think this is going to be the main focus, again, of this administration going forward now. People want to see this. People want to see the video. And we have a right to see the video. But Hegseth is now trying to do a 180 here. He's trying to say, well, you can't see the video. He said this yesterday.
Also going to tomorrow allow the HASC and SASC to see the unedited video of the September 2nd, alongside with Admiral Bradley, who has done a fantastic job, has made all the right calls, and we're glad he'll be there to do it. But in keeping with long-standing Department of War policy, Department of Defense policy, of course, we're not going to release a top-secret, full unedited video of that to the general public. HASC and SASC and appropriate committees will see it, but not the general public.
Okay, why can't we see it, Pete? You said you followed the law. You said everything was fine, within your purview to do whatever you needed to do. These people were narco-terrorists, allegedly bringing drugs into the United States. Why can't we see what happened? Here's the problem, though. What if this is what he is doing? It's obviously illegal to all of a sudden classify any information, documentation, video evidence of any type of crime that may have been committed for the sake of, again, of covering that up. And again, they must provide then a reason why he's classifying this information all of a sudden. What's going on here? Now, again, the committee's investigating the September 2nd strike, obviously first of the campaign, that killed 2 people who were surviving an initial attack, which, again, I said from the start was illegal in and of itself. It violates the Fifth Amendment of our Constitution. And, again, it violates international law to, again, kill people that are shipwrecked, that pose no threat to you. Now, the Navy admiral who ordered the double tap strike, Admiral Frank Bradley, was also going to be appearing before the committees on Wednesday today in a classified briefing that will also include the video of the strike in question. So we're only going to let certain members, it seems, of the House and Senate committees on armed services see the video. I want to see what's going on here. I want to see what they saw. What did they see? Why were these people posing a threat all of a sudden? Originally, he said that there was, the fog of war. We couldn't really tell what was going on. Okay, well, if you couldn't tell that there were survivors, why would you make a second strike, Pete? Did you know about the second strike? Who ordered it? Because somebody fumbled here, obviously, because this is absolutely illegal. This is in the Geneva Conventions. It's in international law. It's in our own war policy here in the United States. When someone is out, when someone surrenders, you don't kill people. This is the point. If someone is calling for help, they're not in the fight anymore, are they? But they're trying to say, well, they still pose a threat to American people by bringing drugs in the United States. I'm sorry, that doesn't fly, though. That doesn't fly. They're not posing any type of threat, and we know that the nearest ship was several miles away. How could people shipwrecked pose any type of threat to you at that point? Oh, but it looked like they were going to call for help. What does that mean, they were going to call for help? And you see, as a result, after this happened, we saw other people that have been shipwrecked. And what did the U.S. military do after that? Well, they allowed the Coast Guard from that nation nearby to come and rescue them. By law, we're supposed to go rescue people when these types of things happen. But they allowed another country to come in and get so-called drug terrorists and couldn't charge them? Again, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't follow any sequence of the semblance of law. Are these people guilty of a crime? Yes or no? You say they are. Why would you let somebody else pick them up then? We have to look and see what's going on, folks. This doesn't make any sense. What Hegseth is saying doesn't follow through if we're trying to obviously prevent drugs from entering the United States. Doesn't seem to work out very well for him. This is going to be a big debacle. Should it come to that they actually broke the law And are these actual war crimes that we are bombing a boat without any type of due process? And then you're killing obvious survivors of that attack that pose absolutely no threat to you whatsoever. So a lot's going to come forward with this. Again, if Congress actually does their job and says, you know what, you don't have the right to do this. What you're doing is illegal. And again, it poses the task of, what the hell are we doing this for? Why are we bombing these boats that are allegedly coming from Venezuela? What is the purpose of this? It isn't drugs, folks. I'll tell you that much. It's not drugs. Oh, by the way, looking into this congressional oversight here in the article here, it says lawmakers have been caught by surprise by the Trump administration several times in the last year, including a move to pause intelligence sharing with Ukraine and a decision to reduce troop presence in NATO countries in Eastern Europe. So we are looking at the change and the protocol of how we are conducting business inside Europe. Because what's happening is we're getting ready to send them south to Venezuela. That's what it's coming down to. Now, the Pentagon is also required under the legislation to keep at least 76,000 troops and major equipment stationed in Europe, of course, unless the NATO allies are consulted. And there is a determination that such a withdrawal is of the U.S. interests. But around 80 to 100,000 U.S. troops are usually present on European soil at any given time, really similar to the requirement that keeps the U.S. troops stationed in South Korea around 28,000. But look at this. We're going to give another $400 million for the next 2 years to manufacture U.S. weapons to be sent to Ukraine. Does this sound like we're looking for peace or for more war? How much more money do we have to give Ukraine? Obviously, those in Europe like this idea. So we're doing two things at the same time. We're trying to pull out of the situation, yet we're continuing to fund this operation that's happening right now. Which is it? Are we going to go for peace? Because if we're going to go for peace, what's the point of giving them another $400 million for the next 2 years each? It doesn't seem to make any sense. There was cuts to, obviously, the diversity and climate initiatives, too. I like that. Look at this, the repeal of war authorizations and Syrian sanctions. This comes in light, of course, of the 3 Americans that were murdered in Syria by the Al-Qaeda members. Who knows if we're going to put sanctions back on them, of course. All these things, folks. Some good things, obviously some bad things. I don't like that we're buddy-buddy with this terror regime that has taken over Syria. We're talking about people that have killed Americans. Perhaps not the behest of the government, but these are his people. Make no mistake about it. These are his people. He was in Al-Qaeda, this guy. He was a murderer of Americans. And there are still Alawites, there are still Druze, there are still Christians being killed inside Syria as we speak. You know, we made that whole big argument about what was happening in Nigeria with Boko Haram killing Christians and Trump threatening intervention, should that continue. Why are we not doing anything right now when innocent people, ethnic minorities, Christians are being killed in Syria? Why not doing anything there? It begs the question. Yet we're removing sanctions. We're allowing them to, come through and focus on what? And again, they're still getting bombed by Israel right now, by the way, too. They're supposed to be in a ceasefire. Yet Lebanon, Gaza, Syria are still getting bombed. And this guy's just the puppet of it all, this al-Shara guy. I don't know, folks. Sometimes it just doesn't tend to make any bit of sense to me. But this is our government now, I guess. This is our government that we continue to see here. All right. Moving on. CNBC. Trump designates Venezuelan government a terrorist regime. This refers back to what I was talking about in this NDAA spending. And orders blockade of sanctioned oil tankers. Do you see how things are ramping up? I mean, they're coming to a T soon, folks. This is going to happen. And I'll tell you why this is a big problem. But it says here, U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday stateside designated Venezuelan's government a terrorist organization and ordered a complete and total blockade of sanctioned oil tankers moving in and out of the country. He took to Truth Social and said that Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. He goes on to say, for the theft of our assets and many other reasons, including terrorism, drug smuggling, and human trafficking, the Venezuelan regime has been designated a foreign terrorist organization. Therefore, today I am ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela, adding that the blockade will only get bigger and the shock to them will be nothing like they have seen before. All right, so Venezuela obviously responded to this. Their government responded, labeling Trump's statements as grotesque and saying that his actions violate international law, free trade, and, of course, free navigation, which constitutes as a serious threat against a sovereign nation. Guess which one here is right? Well, it's the Venezuelans. What are the ramifications of this, though? I listen to this, I say, why are we doing this? Why is this our main focus right now? What's going on here? Well, depending on the duration of this blockade, regardless of Venezuela downsizing from its 1 million barrels produced per day of oil to 860,000, this does put tension on global oil supply and, of course, will stir up the volatility inside the market if this continues to go on. Now, thankfully, there has been a huge increase in production by other OPEC nations. But look at this. We have the WTI crude oil raising 1.25%. We also have Brent crude now increasing slightly as well. Do you like the pump prices low? Well, then why would we go and do this? Why would we go and do this? Upset the market now. Again, if this continues on, you will start to see the increase of prices, though right now you will simply not see it. Again, thanks to the high supply. Again, just as the global supply has a surplus and not a demand of more production, things will be okay right now. But if this continues, you might see things increasing. Yep. Okay. The possibility of the war ending in Ukraine also helps ease tensions as well. What's the purpose of this, though? I ask myself, why are we doing this to Venezuela all of a sudden, unprovoked? Well, we want regime change in Venezuela. That's what it comes down to. We want to put pressure on Maduro and, of course, install Corina Maria Machado, right? She's the puppet they really like and want in there. This is the same woman that wanted Benjamin Netanyahu's government to invade Venezuela and install her, by the way, just so we're all clear on that. Miss Nobel Peace of Nothing Prize. So what are we going to do? Create a scenario to get Venezuela to react? What, attack one of our ships? But never forget this, too, by the way. This could be a hot war. There could be a false flag in the region. We don't know. But we have to understand, too, Russia and China are involved in this. We can't forget that Russia has given advanced weaponry like Oreshnik ballistic missiles, the talks of sending them, other types of cruise missiles that have the ability to reach regional targets inside the United States. Is that what we want? Now, China's less involved, of course, both military wise and what have you, with technology transfers as well, but they are supporting Caracas diplomatically and economically in this situation. So, this certainly escalates the tensions in the region. Obviously, I think you could understand that, because now we have even more issues with trade among the nations is being paused. And again, you know that because you listen to my show. These so-called sanctions Trump talks about in these Truth Social posts have no legal binding whatsoever to international law. So how can we say this is a just act by us? Right? We have Venezuela can trade with whoever they want. And for us to, again, push the U.S. closer to war just signals that we are purposely looking to create tension inside the Caribbean. That's what's happening right now. By the way, these charges, I looked this up, by the way. These charges of terrorism, drug smuggling, human trafficking, really are all baseless. What type of terrorism has Venezuela committed against the United States government? Can anyone think of anything? Now, we know they've sent their people there, but so have 170 other different countries. Why do we just focus on Venezuela in that region? If not for the sake of oil, for the gold resources, other resources they have inside the country, and of course to circumvent Russia and China from getting involved in that before us. That's the problem. Maduro's playing ball with Putin and Xi. Machado's going to play ball with us and probably Israel too. Who knows? That's the point of this, folks. That's the point. We want to control the region. Let's see. Let's look at some of these things, though. Drug trafficking in Venezuela? Really? Okay. Now, from a global standpoint, compared to the United States, it's obviously minimal at best. They tend to focus as a transit hub. They don't really produce drugs inside Venezuela. So the drugs are coming from elsewhere. Who's the big producers of cocaine in the region? That would be Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia. They produce. Now, I'm not saying they don't use Venezuela as a hub. I'm not saying, obviously, it's a good thing, but they are not the ones in charge of the drug operation. They facilitate it, of course. And again, most of the drugs that come in through Venezuela go to Trinidad, they go to West Africa, they go to Europe. They don't come to the United States. So we should understand that. And of course, Mexico obviously is one of the biggest trafficking states for drugs, obviously, in the Western Hemisphere, into the United States. Obviously, we share a border with them. So how can we sit here and say it's simply Venezuela causing this poison to come into the United States? It's just simply not true, folks. It just isn't true at all. And by the way, as for the human trafficking, again, I looked this up too. The U.S. is second globally after Pakistan as far as human trafficking. That would be of sex trafficking and obviously the use of forced labor. Mostly women, by the way. But think about this. We're up there with Pakistan, Venezuela, Nigeria, and Uganda for human trafficking of peoples. I'm not saying our government is directly involved in that, but I'm just saying our nation is involved in this. We have to understand that. Do I dare say look at the Epstein list? Or a case, rather? And look at what he and Ghislaine were doing as far as being charged with trafficking of peoples? You know, we have about 460,000 kids that go missing each and every year in this country. Now, while it's estimated that the actual abductions, for most, is very low, but it begs us the question, what about the 325,000 kids that were sent via Mexico to the United States? How come we haven't located all these kids yet? And I gotta give the Trump administration credit. They found 17,000 of them so far. But what about the other 308,000 people? Where are these kids? Why were they brought to the United States? And for whom? All these things demand valid answers. Remember we found the unaccompanied kids working at a marijuana farm in Camarillo, California? Remember that? When ICE found those two children, I think they were 8 and 10, if I'm not mistaken, working in a marijuana farm. These are the type of things that happen. But we're going to sit there and say Venezuela is a terrorist state because they're human trafficking people? Well, folks, that's happening here too. That's happening here. It's happening in Mexico. It's happening all over South America and Latin America, by the way. Again, go watch Sound of Freedom if you want to see how the trafficking of children, human beings, take place, folks. It isn't mutually exclusive to Venezuela. It happens all over the world, by the way, and it's a disgusting thing, and it should be stopped. And it's good to point out that these things happen, but again, who are we to say they're a terrorist state when they've, number one, not attacked us? Number two, there's no evidence that they are the ones that are sending the drugs that kill Americans here. And again, what are we doing to stop that here in the United States? We have to understand that as well. And number two, human trafficking? Well, hey, that's every single country in the world. But we are towards the top of that list, folks, by the way. Now you look at other countries like Afghanistan, countries like that, where the governments are involved in it, that's another thing to look into. But it's not coming out of Venezuela. Especially based on the numbers. Just wanted to clear all that up for you. I find these claims baseless. I think they're just ways that we look at things and say, oh, well, it's good we can go do this. We have no right, again, by the UN standards, to do this. There are no UN standards that allow us to sanction another country like Venezuela right now because they're not on that list. It hasn't been approved by anybody. Now it says here, we estimated only tankers would threaten about 0.3 million barrels of Venezuelans, roughly 0.9 million barrels a day of total crude oil. This is all about oil, folks. This is all about oil. I mean, this is what it comes down to. It says here, the Trump administration has escalated pressure on the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro in recent months, saying his days are numbered First of all, why do we get to say that about anybody? Is Venezuela a colony of ours? Is it a part of the United States? Of course it isn't. What do we have to say in that? This is what I don't understand. We have no say in this. If the Venezuelan people want to elect Maduro, have at it. What the hell do I care? It's their country. They voted in communism back in 1998. What do we have to do about this? It's not our say. The people of Venezuela didn't come and ask us to save them from Maduro. I'm not saying it's a great country. I'm not saying it's ruled properly. But we have no say in, obviously, ousting Maduro. In regime change, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous that we find ourselves in this mess. Why? Why, when we're $38.5 trillion in debt now, we've got inflation up 3% from last year, we've got people being laid off, unemployment is rising, and this is what we're focusing on? Venezuela? Can we forget about some of the things on the foreign field for a little bit and focus on what's happening here in the United States? We are being hollowed out. We are being replaced now by AI. We're not producing like we once were. Why can't we focus on the United States? Just focus on the United States, President Trump. That's what we elected you for. Doesn't mean we can't have international relations with other countries. Quite the opposite. But he needs to focus on our economy right now because that's what's really, really struggling. Oh, by the way, before we move on to, again, what's happening right here inside the United States, I wanted to go over this yesterday. I didn't have time to go over it, so I'll discuss it briefly with you right now. This is in the Times of Israel. It says that U.S. told Netanyahu's strike on Hamas general violated the ceasefire. The White House is fed up with the Prime Minister. I look at this and I say to myself, it's just a bunch of hot air. There's nothing here. Absolutely nothing here. It's coming from a U.S. official. And the message stated, I'll just read it to you directly. If you want to ruin your reputation and show that you don't abide by agreements, be our guest. But we won't allow you to ruin President Trump's reputation after he brokered the deal in Gaza. I told you before, Netanyahu in Israel violated the ceasefire on day one when they didn't release Marwan Barghouti, or Barghouti, excuse me, if that's how you say his name. He just decided he was going to not release someone that Hamas and the Palestinian people wanted. He was the number one person on that list, and he said, you know what, I'm not going to release him, though. That'd be like Hamas saying, you said you wanted everyone, we're just going to give you, a couple people. That's how we're going to play it. Now, Hamas released all the living hostages and some of the deceased hostages as well. But right from day one, Netanyahu violated the ceasefire. He didn't give them who they wanted back. And again, this Barghouti is a revered leader in the Palestinian society. He's someone that kind of is seen as an uplifting figure. He doesn't want that, though. Netanyahu doesn't want that. And that's the problem with all this. Then we see the amount of food trucks, supposed to be 600 a day. Israel only allowed 150 in a day. You go look at pictures of Gaza right now. There's people living in makeshift tents. The weather right now is very bad there. There's lots of flooding in the region due to the massive rain. And people are just in this mess, folks. And I've told you this before, and I don't know why this all of a sudden came as a shock. They're killing Palestinians inside Gaza every single day. So much for a ceasefire, right? So what about the other people? You get reports 12 killed, 20 killed, 25 killed. They didn't move beyond this imaginary yellow line. What does that even mean? Who drew the line? Where is the line? The line in the sand? Where is it? you have J.D. Vance go there and say, well, it's going as pretty much as planned. Really? Who's overseeing the peace in this region, J.D.? Who's overseeing the peace, President Trump? Where is the peace? We don't see it. Nobody sees it. And again, we see this war kind of being hushed down. Like, oh, we're in a ceasefire. We don't have to pay attention to it. But we know exactly what's going on here. The war's just happening from a little further away. But they're still bombing parts of Gaza. They're still bombing parts of Lebanon. They're supposed to be in a ceasefire with Lebanon. That hasn't done anything. They're still killing people inside Lebanon. They're still killing people inside Syria right now. And they really, really, really want to go back to war with Iran. Iran is the last holdout, really, in their mind and their estimation, to stop them? And where are the Gulf Arab states that are supposed to be kind of facilitating and looking at what's going on here? Does anyone give a damn what's happening to the people of Gaza or the people of Lebanon or the innocent people inside Syria? Does anybody care? Yeah, we're talking about peace. Where's the peace? Nobody sees it. Nobody sees it. No, and by the way, nobody buys it either. That's another problem. These so-called peace deals that he's come up with. Again, I'm glad that President Trump has sat down and tried to get people to talk to each other. I am. Don't misunderstand me here. I'm very happy about that. But there's no peace between these nations. India, Pakistan, any of the other, Armenia versus Azerbaijan. There's no peace. In order for peace to come together, you need their state governments to come together and actually sign a treaty. That's peace. What we have is dialogue. Again, we could pray that dialogue leads to peace, but there's no actual peace breaking out really anywhere. And again, we see this in the defense budget. Why are we giving another $400 million a year for weapons? Why are we doing this? We've already given them well over $350 billion of our taxpayer money. Same thing goes with Israel. We give them over $20 billion this year. They stymied our agreement with Iran to meet. We were going to sit down and meet. And we killed the main negotiator. I mean, this is what's going on right now. Then we came out and said, well, good job, Israel. Thanks for doing that. You could have had a massive peace deal with Iran that would have actually kept Israel safe. And they were going to give us everything we wanted. Now, that's gone. Now, do you think they're going to trust the United States? Do you think Qatar trusts Israel or the United States? Well, they were bombed as well. These things that happen have consequences. And when you get everybody saying, you know what, we can't trust the United States anymore. You say you want to meet, then you let people bomb us? You gave the go on that one? All these things have a major effect on the way people perceive the United States. They don't see us as a beacon of peace because of these issues that happen, largely with Israel doing whatever the hell they want. Bombing Doha, bombing Tehran, bombing inside Gaza after a ceasefire, bombing in Lebanon after a ceasefire, or in Syria, or in Iraq, or in Yemen. Let's see real peace. That's what we want to see here. So there was no response from the Prime Minister's office for comments, of course. Netanyahu had nothing to say. We know he's gone out and saying things like, you know, he runs the United States, he runs President Trump. He says this types of things. He knows what's going on. He does. You know, I got to give Trump credit, though. He tries to, you know, do what he can for Israel to create existing peace. And then, you know, Netanyahu does whatever the hell he wants because he knows that Trump is, you know, essentially bought and paid for. I can't say it another way to you. We see how he responds to these situations. He doesn't do anything. They bombed Doha. What did Trump do to Israel? Well, he got Netanyahu to apologize. Okay. What the hell is that going to do? Yeah, things need to change, folks. Diplomacy needs to change, and we need to hold our so-called allies accountable as well. Netanyahu's just going to do whatever the hell he wants. Let him do it on his own. Zelensky wants to do whatever the hell he wants. Hey, good luck to you. Best of luck. You're going to do so without our money and our support then. And if NATO wants to do the same thing, goodbye, NATO. We don't need you. I don't need you. Do we need him? I don't think so. All right, let's bring it back home for just a moment here. Let's bring it back home. All right. Look at this, the New York Post. Things are not going so well for Mr. Mamdani. I didn't think it would, as I mentioned to you before. It says here that Mamdani is already facing a hurdle in his freebie-filled agenda with a projected $2.81 billion budget shortfall, with bigger funding gaps possible in the years ahead, is what a new report said. They're estimating now that this budget shortfall, by the way, could balloon up to over $13 billion by 2029. And he hasn't even taken office yet. Again, this is due to the fact of the utter budgeting cost of the sluggish growth in the economy inside New York City. Yep, we knew this was going to happen. And we see the idea that people are going to be leaving New York City. They don't want to pay these exorbitantly high taxes. One can understand that. And they're moving to places like Florida. Okay, that makes sense. But the problem is, who's going to pay for these policies? These dream ideas of free everything? I told you this before, it's not going to fall on the wealthy. The wealthy are going to move out. The wealthy are going to go to Long Island. Or put their main residence someplace else so they don't have to pay these taxes. What's going to happen then? The taxes are going to fall on the middle class inside New York City. If it even exists, I don't even know. The millions of people that live there, they're going to have to come up with this in taxation. So instead of paying right then and there for your free bus, right, or your bus ride rather, or your housing or whatever it may be, you're going to see it done through taxation by the city. That's the way it's going to work. So I called this before. I said this was going to happen. We knew this was going to happen. Mamdani has really no idea and experience of what he's doing. Either the plans themselves will fall apart, or simply the tax burden is going to have to fall on the middle class. Now he's pledged over $10 billion, my God, in new spending for his agenda, which primarily he wants to fund through hiking taxes on corporations and the wealthy. And by the way, the corporations, that's going to have to come from the state government, not the city government and local government. And the report also noted that over the last 3 years, expenses have outpaced city revenues, in part due to the federal pandemic aid and surge in asylum seekers across the Big Apple. He's gone out and pledged that he's going to do everything he can for the illegal aliens. He's already said this. He said, we're going to be, against President Trump's ICE policies. We're going to stand up against that. Okay. What happens if President Trump pulls the federal funding from New York City? What happens when you have an exodus of the most wealthy people that live in New York City? How are you going to come up with your budget then? Who's going to pay for it? Because he doesn't have the ability to print out money like that, like D.C. does. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these policies, if they even come to fruition, how they come to, how they're paid for. Now, it says here, Mayor Eric Adams inherited an even larger $5.4 billion budget shortfall from former mayors like Bill de Blasio, which contributed to early budget cuts. So he understood, I got to cut spending. I can't promise everything under the sun. But Mamdani's got a full-blown communist that he is. He's got to come in and try to make up for this. So he's going to have to go to Kathy Hochul. And it's going to get even more difficult if Elise Stefanik takes over the governorship, if that can even happen. I don't know. She's looking favorable in certain polls. Who knows? But then you're definitely not going to get that from a Republican governor. Hochul may try to budge. Who knows? But again, the idea that free this, free that, free everything simply doesn't seem to work very well, I wouldn't think. So Mamdani's got a long road ahead of him. It's going to be a very difficult time for people in New York City and people in New York State should they raise the taxes. These are why these are failed cities, folks. These blue cities and blue states. This is why they fail. They promise you everything, but then they can't deliver. And then what are the Democrats going to do? Vote for Republican? No, they're going to vote for somebody else. The exact same mantra, the same promises, the same feel-good message, the same smile like Mamdani. And it's just simply not going to work. All right, moving on. This is in the Gateway Pundit. I was happy to see this result. I'm very sad that this took place, of course. This is what the case a couple of years ago in 2023. These Las Vegas teens stole a car, and then they murdered a man who was riding a bike, a 64-year-old retired police chief, Andreas Probst. Actually, he was from California, too. They stole a Hyundai. I don't know what kind of Hyundai. I don't know why you'd steal a Hyundai either. Took the vehicle for a joyride and a hit-and-run spree. And the idiots, these two dunces, actually recorded themselves. And as they were going on, they decided to hit a bicyclist. And it was this 64-year-old Andreas Probst. So a video... This is how stupid these two kids are, by the way. This is how dumb they are. The low IQs that they are. They posted the video to social media, showing the phone recording from inside the stolen car with both of them in it. And this one, Ayala, if you excuse me, who was 17 at the time, intentionally commits a hit and run. So they intentionally hit this man, and the passenger, his friend next to him, said, hit his ass. So they show intent from both of them. So they crashed into him, left the scene, Probst was taken to a nearby hospital and then later pronounced dead. It's awful that these things obviously happen. But Jesus Ayala was then hit with 18 charges, including murder, grand larceny, battery, and the use of a deadly weapon and attempted murder. I believe they hit another person as well. That person did survive, though. And his partner in crime, Keys, who was 16 at the time, was hit with 3 different charges, including a murder charge. And both of these low IQ, low life, disgusting waste of human life were seen in the court smirking and laughing. And thankfully, both were charged, found guilty, and, well, look at this. Sentenced to 20 years to life as an outlined plea agreement. Yep. The plea agreement for Keys specified a prison term of 18 years to life. They should be in jail for the rest of their lives. They should have seeked the death penalty. Who the hell acts like this? You steal a car? You purposely run into a man? Laugh about it in the courtroom? I don't think they need to be in civil society ever again. And what about Mr. Probst's life? It's gone. It says here, another bicycle man in his 70s survived this brutal attack. These two should be behind bars for the rest of their life. There should be no option for parole for this at all. Now, the Clark County District Judge, Jacqueline Bluth, sentenced the young men to the terms of agreement for, obviously, 20 years to life. Unbelievable. And, I'm looking at this picture of this gentleman. He's smiling at his birthday. Looks like a great guy. Killed by these 2 low-life pieces of human excrement. I can't take it. I can't take it sometimes. I really can't take it. And the idea that they would get off after serving 15 to 20. What the hell are they going to do in society? Recidivism? What else are they going to do? Find Jesus? What are they going to do? It says both teens will be eligible for parole in the mid-2040s. Get the hell out of here, parole. Should belong behind bars for the rest of their lives. Unbelievable. I'm sick of this soft-on-crime bullcrap that we see constantly. Anyone who's that evil that would encourage someone to kill someone and then someone would go do that and then smile about it after, that's a sick person, folks. I think we all can agree on that. I am glad that they were found guilty. I don't think 20 years to life is good enough for these 2 lowlifes. That's my estimation, of course. Breitbart, by the way, moving on to something else. Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? Schmuck boomer, known as Charles Schumer in the U.S. Senate, calls for more gun control after a handgun attack at the gun-free Brown University. Why not? After all, these policies tend to work out very well, right? Senator Chuck Schumer called for more gun control in response to Saturday's handgun attack at the gun-free Brown University, the same university that has 820 cameras that couldn't find out anything about the shooter and actually found him walking past the FBI agents down the street. But yeah, this shooter is still at large. But don't worry. Chuck says, hey, you know what? We're going to make sure we do more gun bans. That's definitely going to work. Because it's already illegal to shoot somebody like that. Okay. I'm sure it's going to work out just fine, Chuck. You and the Democrats in Rhode Island, I'm sure everything will be just fine. So now, he didn't mention the school's gun-free policy, nor did that go as far as, the prevented, let's see this, to prevent concealed carry permit holders from being armed on campus for self-defense. No, we can't have that either. No self-defense whatsoever. Instead, Schumer goes with the standard Democrat talking point of pushing more gun control laws. After the gun control laws failed in the state. And by the way, so did the policing on the campus and in the city and with the FBI. Then we have a shooter still at large several days after this heinous attack took place, claiming the lives of 2 people, injuring 9 others. Folks, gun control, it's not going to work. It'll never work. But it doesn't stop Schumer from getting up and saying, Congress must again act against gun violence and act against all forms of violent hate. Well, Chuck, that's simply not going to work. It's just not going to work. We know it's not going to work because it didn't work. If it was going to work, it would already have worked already. It's unbelievable, these Democrats. They think they know everything under the sun, but really they just find ways to take more of your God-given rights. That's what it all comes down to. That's what they plan on, by the way, too. Folks, thanks again for tuning in today's show. I appreciate you so much. I hope you learned a lot from the show today. You can share with some friends. I appreciate when you do that. And don't forget, make sure you keep your house in order. It always comes to first, right? Start at home. All right? Make sure you're prepared for starting with food, water, ammo, money, gold, tools, fuel, anything you need to be self-sufficient. And again, I'll see you here tomorrow on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy, and God bless.